Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
What's the most recent book you've finished? Strangers.
Bill Burden, a memoir of a failed marriage.
Wow. Memoir of a failed marriage. What? Why did you want to read that book? What made you pick that up?
It's for I belong to 4 book clubs, and it's for one of them.
4 book clubs, when one just won't do it. All right. So it's a book club book. That's a good reason. Yeah, go ahead, Carol. Okay. Oh, I see a number of heads nodding with that one. That's good. Yeah. What made you pick that up?
Also book club choice.
Book club choice. Lots of book club impelling us around these choices. Allison, are you part of a book club?
I'm not part of a book club.
Okay, what did you read?
I just finished today Allegra Goodman, This Is Not About Us.
Okay.
It's about a Jewish family. It's hilarious. I highly recommend it.
Cool. So good to know. I like hilarious in a book. Not all of them are. Other books, what have you read? Yeah, Andy.
I just finished a Longmire neo-noir Western mystery.
Thank God I wore my cowboy boots to match. There we go. Longmire.
I was inspired.
All right, very good, very good. And Havilah.
Turtle All the Way Down by Tom Green.
Oh, how was that?
It was great. Recommend it.
And why'd you pick that up?
Because August gave it to me after my tongue surgery.
Okay, very good. And Mazel Tov. August, what have you read recently? You work in a library. I mean, come on. Yeah.
I'm reading the Emma M. Lyons series right now.
Okay.
I'm reading Dungeon Fuller Carl.
How many books do you read at the same time?
4 to 5.
Nice.
So you're finished. I'm
I myself tend to read 3 or 4 at a time as well. I'm reading A Brief History of the World in 33 Maps.
Have you done History of the World in 6 classes?
No, I haven't yet.
That one's good.
As one of my teachers in rabbinical school said, anytime anybody ever asks you, have you read a book, you don't ever say no. You always say, not yet. But, so in addition to that, I also just the other day finished reading a book, Anthony Beevor's comprehensive, sort of the big academic history of the Battle of Stalingrad. Big book. I read it because I was kind of curious about tipping points. When one thing that seems to be one set of circumstances in one matter of inevitabilities tips over into something else. And I think one can make a historical argument that Stalingrad was when World War II changed in the European theater. And so I was curious to see, sort of in granular detail, what was that like for the people who underwent that change? I recently read, I guess I finished it back in October, almost a year ago now, a book about the Battle of Hue in Vietnam, because I wanted to understand surprise and being surprised, and a whole country and a whole organization, or for everybody being surprised. What was that like? You know what I mean? We're in a really interesting Torah portion, Shoftim. It talks about if you set a king over yourselves. Okay. And it has a bunch of rules for said king, and how said king is supposed to act and behave, and who the king is supposed to be, and all that. But a really curious one that I thought was so interesting, it specifies that any king of the Israelites is supposed to have their own copy of, that's right, David, the Torah. If you are a king of the Israelites, you are supposed to have your own copy of the Torah just hanging out there with some scribal people, whoever it takes to read it to you, to share with you whatever it is. I thought, what an interesting thing, actually. The text has a lot of anxiety about Malchut, kingship, with the Israelites. It's funny because they don't do a whole lot of king stuff earlier in the Torah, and Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy that we're in, is, by scholarly understanding and consensus, probably a lot later than some of the other books of the Torah, if you want to play in that sort of biblical criticism academic realm. And so it seems that it probably comes about at a time when there probably were kings. This is not written as some of the aspirational utopian work that we see in Exodus, Genesis, anywhere else. But it's probably talking a little bit of current events. It's probably making some observations about the world around it. And there's probably some of that that's actually a little bit cautionary, that's actually a little bit nervous. Story of the Israelite kings. What actually appoints a king over Israel? How does that get started in the first place? David, you answered the last one. I got to call on somebody else. Yes, Josh.
Well, Samuel was like
Thank you.
the head prophet, I guess, at the time. The people were just demanding a king.
Do you remember why they were demanding a king? What came before Samuel? Bad times.
Yeah. They just wanted something to... Well, partly I think that... What's that?
A book by the very same name as this week's parsha, Shoftim. The book of Judges, that my teacher, Dr. Michael Karasik, would more often translate as the book of warlords, because, in fact, it was bad times. And so that whole outcry for a king came out of a pretty nasty place within Israelite history. I would make the argument that if you're looking for the darkest side of human nature and impulse and reactivity in the Hebrew Bible, you'll find it in Shoftim.
Why do you think they call it judges instead of lords?
Sounded better? I think that actually, and the reason this Torah portion, actually to your point, Josh, why was it called judges if they were warlords? Well, we have all this biblical material about establishing judges to adjudicate matters before the people. And so we probably have this caste of people who rose up to rule over the Israelites with the imprimatur of being judges, so to speak. But their functionality is a little bit nastier than that. Judges feels more, it feels very aspirational against the backdrop of how these people actually behave. But anyway, the king's thing is interesting to me, particularly in Shoftim, because it's putting out there, you, the king, ought to be reading the Torah. This idea that what you read actually influences you. It changes who you are. It changes your mind. It impacts the way you see the world around you. It affects what it is you know, what it is you don't know, what it is you want to learn. And so I want to use Shoftim. There aren't that many of us. I was conjuring up this drosh in a moment where I did not know the sitting governor of the state of Delaware would be here. So I was going to say very few of us have administrative ability like kings, not naming names. But I do want to take the occasion of Shoftim to ask, what do you want to read and why? What are you interested in reading and why? Hi, Isaac. Somebody, anybody. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Well, top of my list is stuff I read when I was much younger to see if it holds up.
Interesting. Stuff that I read when I was younger to see if it holds up. In that way, maybe I'm putting too fine a point on it, but it seems to me that the act of reading becomes an act of understanding oneself, taking a look at oneself, self-interrogation, reflection on where it is that you were back then. Now it is that you stand in a different place vis-a-vis that work. That's a pretty noteworthy thing to do with what it is you want to read. What else? What do y'all want to read?
I like, so this book that I just read is about, Jewish family, but most of the time I like to read about cultures that are not my own. So that I really learn about culture.
Okay. Reading about a culture that is not my own so I can learn about a different culture. The 19-year-old who was writing in cultural anthropology and studying that stuff in college that I was very much appreciates that answer. This idea that we can somehow culture being this window into who we are as human beings and identity. What else? What else do y'all want to read? Yeah.
I love reading nonfiction about processes.
Okay.
Getting like a really in-depth understanding of something specific.
Wow.
Right now I'm reading The Secret World of Weather.
Cool.
And my favorite book probably ever was about the creation of the Oxford English Dictionary.
Awesome. I have started following Merriam-Webster's on like social media, and their social media game is fire. I totally recommend you follow the dictionary on social media. What else? Andy, was that a hand? Yeah.
Yeah, I do audiobooks, but a lot of
Cool.
history, a lot of colonial history, just
American colonial history.
American colonial
Okay.
history.
Why?
I like understanding where we came from and being in the region. It's just nice to connect with where we are.
Okay. Andy, as many of you may know, is from New Mexico originally. It feels different, or at least it did to me, to be in one of the original 13 colonies when I was living in LA, when I was living in a place that didn't have a sort of Western history that went back more than, like, I don't know, 40 years or something. I'm being facetious, but, like, you get the point. And so I can understand where, as a native of New Mexico coming and hanging out in Delaware, colonial history would be, yeah, let me get in touch with the roots, the essence, whatever this place is, and the ways that affects it. Yeah, last one. Go ahead, Helene.
I love mysteries and thrillers.
Cool. Why?
I just like the intrigue part of it and the excitement around whether, I mean, they're always going to live, right? Like Daniel Silva gave them out and just not die. And I actually miss my dad because he and I used to read his books and talk about them. But my next book will be Colson Whitehead's new book called Cool Machine, which is part 3 of his trilogy, which goes into Harlem.
Okay.
It takes place in Harlem and just goes into what happened during the gentrification.
Interesting.
When young black people started moving back to Harlem after their grandparents had lived there, then their parents had left.
Wow.
And then they moved back. And it's kind of that story about how gentrification is destroying what the community is and what happens to the people who have been living there the whole time. So anyway, that's my next book.
That to me, hearing that book about gentrification in Harlem feels to me like almost the flip side of the same coin that Allison was talking about, where sometimes getting a look at a culture totally different from yours can tell you something about you. Sometimes going in deep with one's own culture can tell you something about yourself as well, and sometimes it's not always positive. I mention all of this because of this fixation from Parshat Shoftim about reading. What an amazing thing. The Atlantic just recently had a piece that said we are entering an age of post-literacy. That sounds terrible. And so I guess I wanted to uplift that in the moment where the Torah is thinking about authority really needing to be informed by the words of the Torah and by reading. I think what a gift and what a blessing. We are, after all, the people of the book. So I just want to offer that invitation. If it's been a minute since you've read a book, read something. Find something. But in particular, I want to invite you to reflect on why it is, what it is you want to read and why, what it is that's adding a little bit of color, illuminating the manuscript, so to speak, of your own life. Shabbat Shalom.